Guys, I'm a fraud. Now, unfortunately, I only have 24 hours in the day, and that means there are some gaps in my sci-fi and fantasy reading. Here are the 10 that I think are most egregious. I'm going to go through 4 different categories. The first is books that I was supposed to read in 2025 that I, for some reason, didn't. The second will be classic sci-fi. The third will be classic fantasy. And then we'll finish up with some modern books that I feel I ought to have read. Starting with books that were on my 2025 TBR. This is actually quite shameful. I had 5 things on my 2025 TBR and I read over 150 books. So the fact that I didn't get to these is quite bad, quite frankly. The first thing that I was supposed to read in 2025 was the rest of The Wheel of Time. I read the first 5 books and I really enjoyed them, but I can't remember anything that happened in them. So I'm a bit reticent to continue, especially given what I've heard about the later books, in that it becomes kind of a slog. I have to say, fans of The Wheel of Time aren't the best at selling it, because why would you tell me that it's about to get bad? Just, coat it in honey or something, pretend it's good. I spend every book I spend reading The Wheel of Time, I'm like, I'm closer to the slog, I'm closer to the slog. The other book I was supposed to read in 2025 that I didn't was Kushiel's Dart. This is a political fantasy, I think very sex positive, which is nice. I genuinely have no idea why I didn't read this. I think, to be honest, I wrote this TBR and then totally forgot until about November, and then I powered through the other things in it. But for some reason, this wasn't the top of the 5 that I needed to read, and so I have yet to read it, but it is a medium priority for 2026. I may or may not get to it at some point, we'll see. Okay, so those I don't think were too egregious, but we're about to delve into some pretty bad things to be missing off, in my opinion, that I should probably rectify but won't, because I am weird. The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a staple of the sci-fi genre from one of the greatest sci-fi authors of all time. Now, take a little bit of solace in the fact that I have read The Left Hand of Darkness as well as the first Earthsea book, and I think that's the reason I'm not that interested in reading The Dispossessed. I do want to get to it at some point just so I can tick it off, but I'm not necessarily excited for it. I thought The Left Hand of Darkness was average. I do think Le Guin is someone I could potentially get into. I don't really fully see what I'm missing that other people are seeing, if I'm totally honest. I do think it's been a little while since I touched Le Guin, and I have matured as a reader since then in terms of her sci-fi work. And I do think Earthsea suffers a little bit from having inspired a lot of the books I've read, and so it ends up feeling a little bit generic, even though at the time it was revolutionary, and I'm someone who finds separating those quite tricky. I've not read any Robert A. Heinlein, which is, I'm kind of cheating by including an author, but it's a massive gap in my reading. I think probably the biggest gap, and I should rectify it at some point. He wrote, famously, I think, Stranger in a Strange Land and Starship Troopers, which have both been turned into massive movie adaptations as well, which I have not watched. I do actually think I would enjoy Heinlein. I do quite like a classic sci-fi book. So certainly one that is on my TBR. I wish I had good reasons not to have read these books, but a lot of them just, there are other books, and there are so many books, and I'm drowning in books, and so they've kind of been lost among the chaos. So maybe I'll get to Heinlein in 2026. Probably not, because I'm trying to prioritize reading books from LGBT authors, from global majority authors, and from women. And as far as I'm aware, Heinlein doesn't fit into any of those categories. So not really a priority, but nonetheless a gaping hole that probably needs to be filled. That was subtle. Onwards to classic fantasy. Once and Future King I need to read. For the same reason as Heinlein, I'm probably not going to get to it in 2026, but I haven't read a tremendous amount of Arthurian fantasy, and I think this is kind of the big Arthurian fantasy book that people should read. So I should read it, is my thinking. It's pretty popular, it's pretty well known. Conan the Barbarian, I have never read. As someone who is a fantasy fan, this is one of the earliest examples of fantasy, and it's kind of held up as being one of the pivotal moments within the creation of the fantasy genre. So I really, really feel as though I should have read this book. Simultaneously, I think I would hate it because I tend not to like sword and sorcery books. I tend not to like these irritating male protagonists saving women, misogynistic, very old fashioned. I hated Elric for the same reason, and I don't know, I get the vibe that this would be similar to Elric. So it's one of those books that I will probably end up reading because I feel as though I ought to, rather than a book that I'll read because I actually want to be reading it. Okay, so I wanted this list to be a list of 10. So I've just completely cheated on number 7, I think we're on, and gone for basically all of 1980s and 90s fantasy. This is stuff like Raymond E. Feist's stuff, Sword of Shannara, Mists of Avalon. That area of fantasy is just something I haven't really dived into. And the main reason is I didn't find Lord of the Rings particularly compelling. I didn't find it particularly exciting. And as I've read more and more fantasy, I've realized that this generic Western setting with a quest, I find can grow quite tiresome. And this era is kind of known for having this sameness to it that I think the books I listed, and I could be wrong, but definitely Sword of Shannara, they have this kind of sameness to them of trying to emulate Lord of the Rings and essentially just creating a worse Lord of the Rings. It's like bad Lord of the Rings fan fiction. It just doesn't hold any interest or excitement to me. I didn't find Lord of the Rings that interesting, so I don't think I'll find these that interesting. Feel free, if you think I should be reading these books, to comment saying you're a fool. Go and read this one. So on to modern sci-fi and fantasy. Now, I'm pretty well read in this area, if I do say so myself, which I do. But there are still some books I just haven't got round to yet. The first of which is The Night Circus. This is, I get the vibe slightly romantasy, and the same is true of the next book actually, which is Priory of the Orange Tree. They're both chunky standalones that I feel would be kind of romance heavy for me, but nonetheless I feel as though I should read because they're not romance heavy enough to be romantasy. But to be honest, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I try to avoid getting too many details of books before I've read them, and I do want to read both of these. I've heard bad things about the Priory of the Orange Tree, which has put me off. And I do feel as though the marketing campaign with the massive, big, thick book and the pretty spine has been a large part of its success. So I'm wary of picking it up for that reason as well. The Night Circus, I think I'm more inclined to pick up, but still, a bit iffy. So if anyone's read them, again, comment, let me know what you think. The final book in the list, and I think probably the thing I'm most ashamed of not reading yet, is The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. So I actually have read a Daniel Abraham book, and he is half of James S.A. Corey, for those unaware. You're thinking of The Long Price Quartet potentially, but not that, so get screwed. It's actually Age of Ash. I have no idea why I've read this, but I have, and I thought it was pretty good, so I really want to read The Expanse, and it's been top of the priority list for ages, and I just haven't got round to it yet. So I'll probably see you in 2027 making a list of my TBR and saying, I should really read The Expanse. But I haven't read it yet. I should, but I haven't. Which is basically true of all of these books, which is why they made the list. I'm going to do an outro now. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. dance.
3, 6, 5, go. 3, 6, 5, go. 3, 6, 5, go.